Audio test one for the meeting stream. Audio test two for the meeting stream.
I can hear you, Eric.
Good morning, Councillor Brown. Your camera's not on.
I hear two of you, Marty.
Audio test three for the meeting stream.
I can hear you.
But the problem, of course, is.
Good morning, everybody. We're going to commence in about 1 minute. Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome everybody to the Community Services Committee for Tuesday, October 24th, 2023. Il est important de souligner, je m'excuse, il est important de souligner que la ville d'Ottawa se trouve sur un territoire cédé de la nation algonquine et nationale, dont la culture et la présence enrichit et continue d'enrichir ces terres. We do have regrets. Councillor Hill will be arriving late, but I understand he will be coming, and I will start by asking the committee coordinator to call the roll.
Councillor Brown,
Here.
Councillor Carr,
Present.
Councillor Desroches,
Here.
Councillor Hill, Councillor Kavanagh,
Present.
Councillor King,
Here.
Councillor Lowe,
Here.
Conseillère Plante,
Ici, finalement.
Councillor Troster,
Here.
Vice Chair Bradley,
Here.
Chair Dudas.
Je suis présent.
You have quorum, Chair.
Merci. We will proceed as a consent agenda just to get through some of the items and move. We have a number of delegations here today. So one, notices of meet, we don't have any of that. Declarations of interest, I'm not aware of any declarations. No. So confirmation of minutes. Are the confirmation of minutes carried? Carried. Responses to inquiries. Our first response was 4.1, that's swimming lesson registration. Does anyone want to hold this item, or is this received? Received. Item 5.1 is the social assistance modernization and employment services transformation. Okay, we also have a presentation on that, so we'll hold that item. Uh, 6.1 is the commemorative naming proposal for Mary Sy Park. Does anyone wish to hold that item, or can we carry that item? Carried. 6.2 is commemorative naming proposal as well for Crane Park, that is in Kitchissippi Ward. Does anyone have any questions or wish to hold that item, or is that item carried? Carried. We have no in-camera items, and then we have a number of items under information previously distributed that we will return to in just one moment. So I think we're going to start then. We're going to go back to 5.1, which was held by Councillor Troster. We do have a presentation from staff if we wish it. I'm going just in the essence of time and recognizing we have a number of delegations. Does anybody wish to receive that presentation, or would we like to go straight to the members' question about that item? Does anybody want the presentation, I guess?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Staff, if I could ask for us to do the presentation then, please.
Shall I start, Chair? Good morning, everyone. Bon dia to everyone, and bonjour. It is my pleasure to be here today to support our Employment and Social Services team to bring forward an update on the amazing and transformative work that's occurring in that service area. With me is Stephanie Bordage, the acting director of that service area. And this report follows on a report that we submitted to council for information in 2021. It's an update on significant transformative change that's occurring by the provincial, well, directed by the provincial government. So it's occurring here locally. It has to do with social assistance transformation. So transforming the way that what we would typically see the Ontario Works program provided and other supports that would typically be part of the Ontario Works program. Some of those functions are being uploaded to the provincial government in a centralized way. And so our functions and roles are changing locally, and we will have the opportunity to provide more one-on-one directive and intensive case management services and supports with people who are in need, regardless of whether or not they qualify for Ontario Works. So that's the one of the important changes. And this change represents also a significant service shift for us. There's a service model shift you'll hear about Stephanie provide an update on, and a culture change for our teams who were traditionally very focused on assessing financial eligibility and then determining and monitoring that eligibility for funds. And now their jobs are shifting a little bit to really being about, that's one tool in their toolkit, and now they're really about supporting someone to stabilize their lives to be able to move to, if possible, an employment goal. That represents then the second significant change in the transformation that's occurring. You'll hear from Stephanie about today. And it is in relation to the way that Ontario provides employment services to any Ontarian who is seeking employment supports. The province has, again, decentralized that function, formed service system managers regionally in each area of a specific region in Ontario. And those service system managers are taking more of a business approach to the provision of employment services. And so we, being an Employment Ontario site as well, are also considered in that serious transformation. The good news is that it provides an incredible opportunity to shift how we serve, to integrate with our housing services partners and others, which we do already quite successfully, and really support and work and focus with our work with helping people who have a myriad of issues that they need to resolve and stabilize before they can even contemplate employment. And I think most importantly, provides our staff really the opportunity to do the work that they signed up for as social workers, social service workers, and caseworkers, and really spend more time with their clients. So that's a little bit of an intro, and now you're going to get a bit more detail from Stephanie. So go over to you, Stephanie.
Merci, Clara, et merci, Madame la Présidente. I'm pleased to have this opportunity today to provide you with this brief presentation on modernization and transformation initiatives that are underway in the social assistance sector in Ontario. These are some of the most significant changes in the last 20 years. And before I get started, I do want to acknowledge the tremendous work of employment and social services staff. There are more than 500 staff who have been working on the front lines through a pandemic, through constant crises in our community, and in the face of constant change. And they've been working on this journey related to transformation since 2021, and they remain incredibly focused as we push towards this next milestone. Next slide, please. As you're aware, there are two social assistance programs in Ontario. The Ontario Disability Support Program, commonly known as ODSP, which is administered by the province, and the Ontario Works or OW program. As a municipality, the city is delegated in legislation as the delivery agent of Ontario Works in the City of Ottawa. And the intent of the Ontario Works program is to provide temporary support to people in financial need to find sustainable employment, achieve self-sufficiency through effective employment and financial assistance. Historically, both the province and municipalities have each provided an element of financial assistance, case management, and employment programming. And the province's modernization agenda really moves this a step away from that approach and really thinks about functions where they make the most sense. Next slide, please. En 2021, le gouvernement provincial a partagé sa vision de l'aide sociale en Ontario. La mise en œuvre de cette vision consiste à instaurer de nombreuses initiatives qui transforment le rôle qui jouent les gouvernements provinciaux et municipaux dans les prestations sociales. This vision really looks at implementing numerous transformative initiatives that are changing the face of social assistance in Ottawa and across the province. Next slide, please. And so a little bit more about that vision. As I mentioned, the plan really is streamlining the functions of social assistance. So in this plan, financial eligibility decisions and benefit issuances are being centralized with the province of Ontario, along with other back-end and highly administrative audit functions as well. And the intent of this shift is to provide municipal staff with the opportunity to provide high-impact case management activities. So really working with individuals in crisis when and where they need it the most. Examples of this may include supporting clients to navigate the housing system, newcomers to Ottawa, accessing identification, food security, child welfare system, and much more. Providing employment services is also shifting, as that will no longer fall under the purview of municipalities, and instead will align with Employment Ontario, and programs will be administered to social assistance recipients, therefore centralizing all employment services. And I'll provide more information shortly around the employment transformation aspect. Next slide, please. To fulfill its responsibility under the financial eligibility and benefit component of social assistance, the province has created a centralized intake and benefits administrative unit. So this means that Ontario residents who are applying for social assistance can apply over the phone or online. And using a risk-based model, the province will determine eligibility and then assign the case to the local office for ongoing case management and stability supports. In this model, municipalities, including Ottawa, will always complete some applications for assistance. And this makes the most sense as we are well equipped to respond in a timely manner, to respond to crises, and the complexity of people's lives. The province intends to complete 70% of all applications for social assistance, but it is important to note that at this time, staff in Ottawa are completing the majority of applications. In 2023, staff have completed a little more than 8,900 applications this year. Staff are working collaboratively with the province to support them in meeting their goal, and we meet on a bi-monthly basis. It is not known when the province will assume those other functions related to benefit issuance, and that work continues to also be done by municipal staff at this time. Next slide, please. Ontario Travail demeure un programme axé sur l'emploi. Son but est d'aider les gens à trouver un emploi durable. Le parcours pour parvenir à cet emploi varie d'un résident à l'autre et ça dépend de la situation de chacun. Given that each resident's unique path and journey is different, the centralization and eligibility of determination and those administrative tasks with the province, the municipalities will focus on person-centered or stability support care. This means staff will be working much more closely with residents who receive Ontario Works. We will also be working with adults who are on the Ontario Disability Support Plan, Ontario Disability Support budget who are not disabled. So those would be anybody over the age of 18 or the non-disabled spouse, if there is one. And our staff will work to identify and address barriers that individuals are facing to well-being, employment readiness, and greater financial independence. And our staff, our municipal staff, are best positioned to fulfill this role. This has always been an element of the work that we've done. This supports the knowledge that we have, our connection with community services, and our staff continue to do this work. And again, I want to recognize the staff of Employment and Social Services who provide this, who serve clients every day at home, in the office, and in the community. They provide referrals, they issue benefits, they assess needs, and they are dealing head-on with the impacts of inflation, a toxic drug supply, and undoubtedly a housing crisis in our city. Next slide, please. In January 2024, Ottawa, as an Ontario Works delivery agent, will no longer provide employment services to social recipients. All employment services are being centralized with the province of Ontario, Services are being coordinated by a service system manager and delivered by Employment Ontario providers. From an Ontario Works role, our role is to assess when a client is ready for that referral and to complete the referral to Employment Ontario. In Ottawa, there are 9 EO or Employment Ontario providers, and the City of Ottawa is in a very unique role as we are one of those Employment Ontario providers. There are 4 municipalities across the province that have this dual role. We have extensive experience providing and delivering effective employment services to residents. More specifically, we are specialized in providing employment services to residents, including youth, who receive social assistance and individuals who face complex barriers when it comes to employment goals. The Employment Ontario program is 100% provincially funded, and we're anticipating an update on our 2024-2025 budget by the end of this month. Our service system manager in Ottawa has been identified as WCG International, and we have been meeting with them since February to be able to prepare for this change, both in Ontario Works and Employment Ontario. We believe that employment is an important lever out of poverty, and we continue to remain in this business. Okay, next slide, please. As noted in the report, the employment services is now the responsibility of the province as of January 2024. And so the province will be transferring a portion of our Ontario Works funding that previously had been allocated to the City of Ottawa to those new service system managers for employment. In Ottawa, this budget reduction equates to approximately $9 million. We anticipated this budget reduction, and we have planned and mitigated these impacts extensively over the last year. Employment Ontario will now issue benefits directly to social assistance recipients for employment supports. Next slide, please. Funding received from the province to provide employment supports and services also included funds that were issued directly to Ontario Works, and they would support a resident's participation in employment activities. As of January, those funds will no longer be available from Ontario Works, as Employment Ontario will be issuing those funds. Ontario Works staff, however, will continue to capitalize on a wide range of existing social assistance benefits. We have also realigned $1.5 million of provincial funding to establish a local stability support benefit to assist residents who are not yet ready to be referred to Employment Ontario. And examples of use of that benefit may include digital supports, access to phone and internet, transportation for non-medical or medical related needs, and more minor fees for applications and such. As Clara mentioned earlier, next slide, please. This is significant transformation that is underway, and we have to adjust our service delivery model to align with the provincial vision for a modernized social assistance system in Ontario. And so we can ensure our success in delivering a person-centered stability support and respond to the community needs and priorities. In our approach, we want to ensure that our services are responsive to residents in need, are simple to access and easy to navigate, and they're provided in the most respectful and dignified way. And we have made significant strides in the evolution of this model. The Catherine Street Community Services Hub has served more than 13,000 residents in 2023. Our outreach and mobile services team has provided more than 1,300 interactions in our community. And our applications and benefits unit continues to respond to more than 25,000 calls on an annual basis. These are just a few of the ways that Employment and Social Services is serving residents in Ottawa. Merci, Chair. I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Councillor Troster, you have a question.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you, Claire and Stephanie. And first of all, I want to commend you on the work you've done with the Catherine Street Hub, which is in my ward. It's been really transformative. It's also really exciting because the Centertown Emergency Food Center is there. So to have a one-stop shop where somebody who is in need can come in and access provincial services, city services, the food bank, also outreach services from community health centers is great. But I do have quite a few questions. I was wondering if you can walk me through, from the perspective of the person who's applying for social assistance, how this process is going to be different for them as opposed to what they're doing now.
Thank you, through the chair. When someone applies for social assistance, they may apply online or they may apply over the phone. And they will then, if they're granted, their file will then be transferred to the local municipality. That process is underway, And we're working with the province to improve that process so that more applications are part of that auto grant at the beginning. At that point, when the file is transferred to the local municipality, staff will be using a new tool called a common assessment tool to really look at the person and their entire situation to be able to assess whether that is that they're referral ready to Employment Ontario or not. And with the changes that are anticipated around those administrative functions shifting to the province, this will enable staff to have more time to support that individual with where they're at. Staff currently juggle many balls related to eligibility, finance. Some are also providing employment supports as well as intensive case management. And these changes really enable staff to be able to provide that level of comprehensive case management with Ontario Works recipients.
Okay, so if someone applies online directly to the province and they're denied, can they walk into the Catherine Street Hub, for example, and speak to one of the city staff about why that happened and what their options are in terms of appeal? Like, I'm just asking, will they be able to talk to a real human being? Because I represent the ward with the highest rate of poverty, a ton of people on social assistance, and navigating systems is one of the toughest barriers for those folks.
Ottawa has, over the last year and a half since the province rolled out the centralized and automated intake model, created a local response, and that includes the ability for anybody in crisis to be able to walk in and receive service in person. So we will continue to make sure that in any model that the province rolls out, that we can respond to clients when and where they need us most.
Okay, because I have folks in my ward who don't have a phone, right? Like really in a marginalized spot, exiting homelessness potentially. I have another question. So you say 25 full-time jobs will be cut from the city payroll. Will these folks be given a different job offer within the city or with the new contractor who will be providing employment services?
So these, we communicated in May an update to council around the budget reduction. What I can say is that all staff were afforded with their collective agreement rights, and there were no frontline positions that were reduced. And so we focused on a management restructuring and some funding that was related to employment funded positions. We extensively mitigated vacancies and positions that were vacant to be able to have the least amount of impact possible.
Okay, let's some of my other colleagues that question. Just one more question. In the document, it says Ontario Works delivery agents have been required to meet provincially defined performance outcomes. Failure to achieve set targets can result in a 15% reduction in funding. What constitutes a performance target?
We have always had performance targets. And so as of 2024, we will have 5 new performance targets that are funded that are for the City of Ottawa. Those targets, there'll be 5 new measures. Those measures include participation. So Ontario Works and ODSP non-disabled applicants must have an action plan is one of those targets. Another one is that those that are eligible must be referred to Employment Ontario. We are going to be monitored on the number of completed referrals, so referrals that are accepted to Employment Ontario, our exits to employment, looking at the number of cases that exit Ontario Works on an annual basis. And we'll also be monitored on the number of cases that exit to employment that do not return to Ontario Works within a year. So those new measures will be rolled out in 2024. 2024 is considered a transition year, and there'll be our budget will be held in 2024 as well.
Thank you very much, and thanks for all the work you do. I understand that a lot of these changes are being imposed by the province. I remain very, very concerned about a service that is currently being delivered by unionized city employees being contracted out to a private company. I think it remains to be seen what the quality of that service will be. And changes in the quality of service have a really detrimental impact on the poorest people in our city. So we'll be watching that really closely. And I hope that we can provide feedback if we feel that people are slipping through the cracks. Thank you.
Vice Chair Bradley, you're next.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Clara and Stephanie, for the presentation. I just have a couple questions. One is just a point of clarification on the 1.5 million that's being realigned. Where is that money coming from?
Thank you, Chair. Those funds are provincial dollars that we have the discretion to adjust as per local use. And so we are creating a local policy that will enable our staff to issue those benefits to clients recognizing that not all Ontario Works recipients will be ready to receive a referral to Employment Ontario. And so that benefit will aid our staff to be able to support clients with what they need prior to
Perfect.
that referral.
And then I just wanted to focus on the local stability fund. Previously, I had asked some questions about transportation benefits under the employment benefits. So previously, if someone was receiving employment benefits, they weren't eligible to purchase an Equipass with their employment benefits. They had to purchase a pass at full freight. And so I'm just wondering, under the local stability fund, if they receive that benefit and they'd like to purchase a transit pass, will they be eligible to purchase the reduced fare Equipass?
What an excellent question. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because the current Equipass policy indicated that if you received a transportation benefit from Ontario Works, you were not eligible for the Equipass. Given that the dedicated transportation funding from the province is no longer available as of next year, we've been working with OC Transpo. And so as of January 2024, any resident in receipt of social assistance will qualify for the Equipass as of January.
That's fantastic. And I guess as a follow-up to that, how will that be communicated out? Because I know we haven't seen the uptake that I think we would expect with the Equipass, given the affordability issues in our community right now. So how will that be communicated that those folks are now eligible?
So we are working very closely with OC Transpo in terms of what that communication plan will look like. Our staff are being trained in the coming weeks to be able to provide that information to their clients. And that includes working with OC Transpo to obtain promotional materials so that we can advertise this information not only in our centers, but also with our community partners as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Bradley. Vous êtes la prochaine, Madame Conseillère.
Merci beaucoup. Moi, j'ai un cas, c'est un cas que j'ai été voir ce matin et j'avoue, c'est un peu particulier, mais c'est un monsieur qui est dans un encampement. Il utilise l'adresse de ses parents pour avoir son ODSP. Et puis, il a dit que s'il s'en va dans une refuge ou si on est en train de divulguer il vit essentiellement à deux places, qu'il ne peut plus avoir son ODSP. Dans des cas comme ça, est-ce qu'il y a façon de communiquer avec la province qu'on a des cas particuliers, qu'il faut des exceptions? Comment ça fonctionne exactement?
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Dépendamment de la situation, il y a différentes prestations qui sont admissibles pour quelqu'un. Donc, la meilleure situation à faire, c'est de travailler avec le coordinateur de cas aux côtés du niveau de la province pour discuter de la situation, pour voir les prestations qui sont disponibles, pour voir qu'est-ce qui est le mieux pour le client, certainement dépendant des politiques qui sont présents. Le bureau de ODSP, c'est sur la rue Preston, mais nous avons également des employés de ODSP qui sont situés dans le Catherine Street Community Hub, qui peuvent également assister un client ou bien quelqu'un qui travaille avec lui pour avoir plus d'informations sur la situation particulière.
Mais est-ce qu'il y a une marge de manœuvre dans le programme lui-même pour des cas particuliers ou c'est vraiment strict à la ligne qui peut recevoir et qui ne peut pas recevoir?
Ça dépend de quelle sorte d'abris qui sont dedans et ça dépend également de leur situation, c'est quoi leur responsabilité. Donc, je ne peux pas vraiment faire un commentaire par rapport à une situation précise. C'est sûrement qu'il y a des politiques à suivre, mais ça dépend vraiment de c'est quoi la situation, quelle sorte d'abri et c'est quoi l'adresse sur le dossier. Mais je suis certainement, on peut en parler par après pour avoir quelqu'un qui peut regarder la situation.
Oui, parce que je me disais, comme quelqu'un qui reste dans un encampement spécifiquement pour avoir des prestations, ça, c'est inacceptable qu'on a ça comme politique, mais évidemment, ce n'est pas à nous qui fait la législation de qui est éligible et qui ne l'est pas. Alors, je voulais juste savoir si, comme la Ville, on a des façons de communiquer ces sortes de besoins à la province et qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire par la suite. Mais merci beaucoup, j'apprécie.
Merci. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the presentation. I'm hoping this is positive for residents. How will it affect them in terms of the actual residents who are receiving ODSP and Ontario Works? Are they going to get some information? Are they going to be grandfathered under the old system? Pardon me if these are very basic questions, but I know we're going to get the calls, so I want our offices to be prepared.
Thank you, Chair. Staff are being trained. We've been working very closely with the service system manager and the various ministries to prepare staff. And a component of that includes the messaging to our clients. And so we'll be communicating with clients from now until the end of the year to prepare them for the changes that are coming to play. We've also been engaging with our community partners to ensure that our community partners are aware of the changes in the system. And so this is a gradual change. Many elements are rolled out over time. And so over 2024, our staff will be meeting with all Ontario Works clients, a little over almost 17,000 individuals and families in Ottawa, to complete the new common assessment, to be able to have that conversation about what their situation is like and what is the best referral for them. And so that one-on-one relationship with their caseworker will continue to be an excellent place for that client to ask questions. And our service system manager through the Employment Ontario providers is also working on a media information that will be available to be able to distribute to clients and community providers in the city as well.
Yeah, I guess the biggest fear is if they lose money, that their income will go down. And given that many of them live on like $1,600 a month, that's pretty critical. So that would be good to hear from, just to give our offices some information on how those changes will look, so that we're aware and our offices are aware. Yesterday, we met with community health centers, and it was a good meeting, and they're just talking to us pre-budget, and they're looking for one-stop shops too. And this is an obvious change where we can work with them. But one of the things that kept coming up is food insecurity and how that fits in. So I realize our staff are going to be working with clients, but food insecurity is so huge. How does that fit in, and how do we tie in food banks?
Our staff are already working with clients on this issue. The social assistance rates have not changed since 2018. And so it has been something that residents in our community are already struggling with in many ways. We have not only co-located the Centertown Food Center at the Catherine Street Hub, but we've also have staff that are out in the community actually working in some of the food banks to be able to support residents potentially at their first point of contact before they come on to social assistance as they access food through their various food banks in the city. So we'll continue to provide those services there. And then we'll continue to educate our staff about the information that's available. We're also looking at our space. We're looking at where we're geographically located in the city. We currently have 4 main locations. And part of that space plan, which evolves over the next several of years, also takes into account the partners and where they are, and importantly, where our clients are located. So we'll be engaging with those community partners, of which the food bank is one of them, when we also think about where we can provide services and where there may be opportunities for co-location.
Thank you. I know places like Britannia Woods have already made appeals for a community hub because they're desperate. They've become a food pantry that's exploded in popularity of, well, popularity is not a good word, in need. And it's overwhelming. They don't have the space. It sounds like this is an ideal time to make a transition and work with these community houses, which are across the city. I'm just using Britannia Woods as an example, but they've been very vocal about their needs. And in terms of one-stop shop, also in mentoring programs for Black youth, et cetera. These are all things that they're doing, and but they're doing it in different locations, renting space in an office building, things like that. So I think if we're going to change over to a different model, I think we have to look not just, and I appreciate the Catherine Street. I'd like to visit it and see what it's like, but we'll need it across the city. And I can tell you the need is great, even outside of the core. So I'm hoping that this is an opportunity. In terms of transit passes, it's kind of interesting because I was approached with somebody who is on ODSP yesterday, who was telling me how difficult it was to get a community pass and the paperwork, et cetera. And so this was good news to hear that the EquiPass was going to be, the process was going to be smoothed out. That's wonderful news because I think that's a big barrier for those trying to have access to those passes. We need to make it, we need more ridership, and if it's paperwork that's holding us up, that's problematic. Can you talk about the community pass as well? How that will fit in?
Thank you, Chair. We would certainly be glad to bring that feedback back into our discussions with OC Transpo around the application process. Wherever we can have a simple application that's easy to navigate is the preferred option. And we are exploring various options with OC Transpo, even as it relates to the Equipass. And is there an opportunity to simplify that process? So we'd be happy to bring this feedback back to OC Transpo in terms of what the application looks like and the feedback that you've shared.
Yeah, I'm talking about the community pass as well.
Correct.
You know, they have to go to their doctors who's on the other side of town, and they haven't got a pass for it. It seems kind of ironic to get their signature. There's got to be a better way when people are actually on a program like ODSP. Isn't that proof enough? There must be a way to identify people so they don't have to go through that running around process, because it makes them feel like they're, you know, they're not trusted. And but clearly, if they're in the system, there must be a record. So no, and we need that ridership, and we want them to use it. Thank you. So yeah, I'd like to hear more about how food banks can be incorporated. This is an opportunity, and I'd like to know more about how we're working with our community health centers that are already there. I think they're obviously great partners in our community. So if you can let us know more about that. And in terms of the funding, the $9 million reduction was a little scary, and 25 jobs lost. And I get it that it's taking away more management, administration, and we're going to focus on client services. But how are we going to find the funding for that? Because I have a feeling it's going to grow, given the need out there.
Thank you, Chair. And so we will, that $9 million was related to both, our budget strategies included some of the client benefits that will now be issued by the Employment Ontario provider. So a portion of that funding has been realigned for Employment Ontario to issue those benefits directly to clients, because the majority of Ontario Works clients were receiving the benefit directly through Ontario Works. And so now they'll have a choice of 9 providers who can issue those benefits as well. So that's a significant shift. In terms of the positions, we looked at a management restructuring that really simplified the structure that existed, and also considered the client experience when clients are reaching out with the questions, inquiries, appeals, whatever that may be. And then we also anticipated the reduction around the change in terms of employment. And so while we had vacancies that we had been planning for over time, so that we could mitigate the impact directly on both staff and the impact on clients.
And I just want to suggest that we have training for our counselor staff as well, because they're going to be on the front lines answering phone calls from residents on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor DeRoche.
Thank you, Chair. There's some good questions earlier for committee to understand the intake process and to visualize that. And I over the years, I've asked the question, and I hope we're making progress on it, is how do we screen for veterans, whether that be for these services or housing or employment? We know that there is a federal Department of Veterans Affairs that offers a whole host of programs for veterans. It's a tragedy when we hear that that they're surplusing money, or that the money is not going towards veterans. And I think we can play a big role. And I'm pleased to serve with Councillor Hill and Luloff on the Veterans Task Force to make sure that our programs have the plug points for directing and helping veterans navigate, as was stated, which can often be a very confusing and frustrating process. But I think it starts with us screening for veterans to make sure that they're being helped with the programs and services. And again, nothing's more frustrating that we set up these programs and we're not helping the people in need. So could you comment on how we're screening for veterans and and making sure that our partners that have a mandate to help them are plugged into the process. Thank you.
Thanks for that question, and through you, Chair. The screening that as part of this model, an Ontario work staff or an employment and social services staff will undertake is a common assessment tool. So as they ask those common questions, if someone identifies that they're a veteran, then what will happen is a discussion about what are the services that are best placed for that person, because they may or may not qualify for a financial benefit under Ontario Works, for instance, if they have a pension of some sort. But that eligibility or discussion around the kinds of needs that a veteran in particular would have is exactly the kind of work that our staff would be doing, is having that conversation early on, and then working with our housing services partners, for instance, who are working on other initiatives to support veterans with their housing needs. And so I would ask you to leave it with us, because as we move forward with this shift and change, and we'll take that back as well with our staff to look at other ways that we can be maybe more proactive with asking the question about military service.
Yeah, thank you for that, and I'm sure Councillor Hill joins me in looking for some follow up on that, because I did hear you say if it comes up. Again, I hope that that it's a box that we tick off. You know, do you have military service? Are you a veteran? So that again, you can go into some of the avenues that are there for them. So if you could follow up, that would be much appreciated. I look forward to that. Thank you. Thanks, Chair. That's all for me.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Troster.
Hi, thanks again for your patience. I just wanted to pick up one quote in the report where you say, the experience for the resident has been impacted. The two-step process results in the need to tell their story multiple times to multiple people, along with confusion about who the primary point of contact is. So, you know, I think Teresa was getting at this too. I think one of the many barriers for people who are living in poverty is multiple application processes, having to tell their traumatic story over and over and over again, which leads to more trauma and more disengagement with city services. So I'm just wondering what you've been able to do to mitigate this and what you'll be doing going forward.
Thank you for the question through the chair. We have been very proactive at adjusting our service model. So as the province was rolling out the centralized intake team, we have tried different iterations to be able to best support clients as they're coming in. And really that tenet of putting the client at the center, not wanting them to have to retell their story, has been what has guided us in the evolution of this. So for example, right now we have a small team that connects with individuals who've had that application with the province to make sure that they are receiving the benefits that they're entitled to. On the flip side, we also are ensuring that when clients have been granted by the province, or when we are doing the application, that they're immediately connected with their caseworker. And so we're not interested in an application process at an internal level that does anything other than prioritize the dignity and respect of that individual. And so we've been making very concentrated efforts to ensure that our staff have the tools, the training, and the capacity as the system continues to evolve to meet with clients. Taking a trauma-informed approach has been a tenet of our service model. Our staff are also completing mental health first aid training as an example, to be able to support those individuals. We also are continuing to provide feedback to the province and to the earlier question as well around what is working and what does that client experience look like. We meet with the province every 2 months, if not more often, and we've escalated more than 1,500 specific issues where the client experience or the benefits that were issued, where there was an opportunity to do better, and we'll continue to do that.
Thank you.
Councillor Hill.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just wanted to follow up on the question that was put forth by Councillor DeRoche. In fact, the reason I was late this morning is because we had one of our biannual Respect Forum meetings, which essentially gathers the totality of the veteran support nonprofits and support entities to talk about exactly these types of issues. And certainly I will take it on as one of the board members for that entity to make sure that these changes are understood by our partners in the Respect Forum through the Ottawa Task Force, because it's certainly important to make sure that those that may be in need in that space understand and are brought towards the resources that are offered to them. So I'll certainly make sure that's brought forward. But thank you very much, Councillor Drosh, for bringing that up.
Thanks for that kind offer, Councillor Hill. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to learn more about WCG International, and I guess I share the concern of Councillor Troster in terms of that this is being done by a for-profit business, and so there are concerns, and I just want to know what we know about them. Is this across the province or just us? And you know, what confidence do we have? Because obviously this is a big change.
Thank you, through you, Chair. There were 15 catchment areas that were identified in the province of Ontario, and Ottawa and region is one of those catchment areas. And so WCG International, who was identified as the service system manager, not only for Ottawa and the Eastern region, but they are also the service system manager for Peel region and York region as well. They are a Canadian subsidiary in an international APM group. And what we know about them is that since we've started meeting with them since February, they have been very responsive in terms of the needs of what Ottawa is, and recognizing that the geographic landscape and the uniqueness of Ottawa, our newcomers, our languages, the economic situation is very different than that of other municipalities where they are the service system manager already. And so they've been meeting with us as well as other regional partners. They've also been meeting with all the Employment Ontario providers since February as well. They have been very responsive in terms of hearing the feedback that we've been sharing. They are committed, they've indicated that they're committed to continuing to work with us and identifying a triage process for any escalated issue that may arise in January. We've also been in touch with Peel and York to learn about their experience as well. We've been provided with feedback that WCG has learned a lot through their experience. We're not their first kick at the can. We're now the third evolution, the third community that they are the SSM in the service model. And the other municipalities have told us that while there are some growing pains in the implementation of the model, the WCG has been very responsive and is more than willing to come to the table to look at collaborative solutions. And so we continue to meet with them. Go live is January, and we'd be happy to bring back an update in 2024 about what that process looks like and how's it going.
Thank you. I just wasn't clear where their role stops and where our local team comes in. Can you give me a sense of that?
So the service system manager provides oversight for the region, and then there are 9 Employment Ontario providers. The City of Ottawa is one of those 9 Employment Ontario providers. And so these are our staff that have been providing employment services for many years. And they really are specialized in that sector of working not only with residents that may be reaching out to employment services, but also working with employers as well. And so there's a combination of Employment Ontario providers within the City of Ottawa. They include the City of Ottawa, St. Lawrence College, the Community Employment Resource Center, Agilic, the YMCA, Youth Services Bureau, Pinecrest Community Health and Resource Center, La Cité Collégiale, and the Vanier Community Center as well.
Okay, so we're the only ones that interact with them. We're not, I mean, in terms of like clients only talk to our staff.
Clients, exactly. So clients who are referred to Employment Ontario could be working with any of these 9 providers. They're working with our staff directly. And the service system manager is behind the scenes, and they're primarily contacted through the Employment Ontario provider, or in our case, also as the Ontario Works delivery agent as well.
Okay, thank you. Well, I just hope that no balls are dropped in that transition on behalf of our clients. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kavanaugh. And thank you everyone for your questions, and thank you staff for the presentation and the information. Is this item carried? Carried?
Thank you.
Wonderful. We are now moving on to item 8.1. We had gone through the consent agenda and we're now on this item. This item is the Tenant Defense Fund programs in Toronto and Hamilton. It was information previously distributed. We do have a motion to lift this onto the agenda. I will ask Councillor Troster to read that motion.
Thank you, Chair. Be it resolved that the Community Services Committee allow discussion of this item for consideration by the committee at today's meeting pursuant to subsection 89(4) of the procedure bylaw, being bylaw number 2022-410, to receive oral submissions from residents and consider a related motion.
Is this item carried? Carried. Wonderful. So we'll add this item to the agenda. We do have delegations. Prior to that, though, I know Councillor Troster has a motion directing staff in respect. So I think if Councillor Troster can read that in, then we'll be able to have a fulsome debate on that.
Thank you, Chair. Whereas Tenant Defense Fund programs in Toronto and Hamilton have successfully helped protect existing affordable rentals, with Hamilton's fund showing a 100% success rate at the Landlord Tenant Board for above guideline increased applications and over 80% for N13 notices. And whereas the memo circulated by city staff concluded that further investigation into a tenant defense program for Ottawa could be beneficial. And whereas the 10-year housing and homelessness plan is due to be commenced in 2024 and to be completed by Q2 2025. And whereas Ottawa has fully allocated all available funding from federal, provincial, and municipal funding envelopes. And whereas tenant organizations have raised concern about an observed increase in N12s, N5s, and N11s, I can define those after for you, being issued in addition to N13s and above guideline rent increases. Therefore, be it resolved that the Community Services Committee directs staff to complete a review of housing loss prevention strategies, which will include a tenants defense fund through the 24-25 update of the 10-year housing and homelessness plan. And be it further resolved that this engagement include tenant organizations or associations, as well as councillors' offices to capture current and emerging eviction tactics. And be it further resolved that Community Services Committee directs staff to engage the province and federal governments to discuss a pilot program for a tenant defense fund in Ottawa. And be it further resolved that Community Services Committee directs staff to report back to committee by memorandum in Q3 2024 on the current capacity of available housing loss prevention programs and what resources would be required to scale up those programs to meet demand. And be it further resolved that Community Services Committee directs staff to provide committee with an information report no later than Q2 2025, with options on next steps to create a comprehensive housing loss prevention strategy, which may include a tenant defense fund and the 10-year housing and homelessness plan. Can I speak to this quickly before we move to delegations?
Actually, what I prefer, we'll move to delegations, and then what we'll do is we'll have that discussion. You'll have an opportunity to speak to it. I'd like to invite Sharon Katz from Ottawa Acorn. Sharon, is that you, madam? You can come on up here. You have to come to the microphone. Following Sharon, we'll have John Dickey, just to have John on standby. Sharon, you'll have 5 minutes. Please proceed.
Hello. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Sharon Katz, and I'm a member of Ottawa Acorn. Acorn is a nonprofit organization of low and moderate income people fighting for the rights of other low and moderate income people. Acorn believes that having a tenant defense fund is an important tool to help prevent tenants from becoming homeless because they are forced out of their existing housing. And we believe that this is an urgent priority because it is happening all the time to our members and to other tenants across the city. We are losing 7 units of affordable housing on the private market for every 1 unit of social housing that's being built. Renovictions, then evictions, and AGIs are huge contributors to this loss of affordable housing. But when tenants go to the LTB to defend themselves in these situations, they are often without legal representation. Major barriers that tenants have identified include the high cost of legal representation, as well as people not understanding their rights or how the legal system works and feeling overwhelmed by complicated legal forms. Another severe impediment for marginalized tenants is the limited availability of and restrictions on free legal resources. Meanwhile, landlords and property management companies have the financial resources to retain lawyers and always have representation at the LTB. This creates a huge power imbalance between tenants and landlords and often results in the loss of affordable housing and mass tenant displacement. In city staff's memo, they explain that in Ottawa, there are 2 community agencies, Housing Help and Action Logement, that provide city-funded services and support for clients who are in need of safe, secure, and affordable housing. Both of these organizations have indicated that demand for their services exceeds capacity, which supports Acorn's call for a tenant defense fund. We would also add that the other existing legal services mentioned in the memo are inadequate, as they provide only 30 minutes of legal counsel, which is not enough for anything, and community legal clinics are not able to provide services for AGIs at all due to provincial funding cuts. The role of a tenant defense fund has 2 basic aspects: legal information and legal representation. On the information front, we believe that there should be a tenant hotline similar to the one in Toronto. We also believe there should be proactive tenant outreach by the city so people know about the tenant defense fund, know what their rights are, and know what supports they can access when their housing is at risk. On the direct assistance front, Acorn believes that a tenant defense fund should provide assistance to tenants and tenant groups to counteract the variety of ways that landlords make affordable housing on the private market unaffordable, to dispute AGIs, above guideline rent increases, and to challenge the various forms of eviction notices, N13s, which is a dem eviction, rent eviction, and also N12s, N5s, and N11s, as these are increasingly being used as tactics to evict tenants. N12 is an eviction notice when the landlord or their immediate family plans to move in. I heard a story of a landlord in a 200-unit apartment building who served everyone with N12 notices. I really don't think he had that many relatives. N5 is an eviction notice for disruptive behavior. This has been used by landlords in Ottawa to scare tenants trying to organize their building or for simply asking for repairs. N11 is when the landlord and tenant agree to end the lease early. Acorn has had multiple cases reported by tenants where landlords tell tenants they have no other choice but to sign these, which is untrue and is only a means to push out tenants with shorter notice and less compensation. We also want the Tenant Defense Fund in Ottawa to provide assistance for tenant groups who are experiencing cases of neglected maintenance to be able to file T6s and rent abatement applications to the Landlord and Tenant Board, and assistance for tenant groups to file T2s over landlord's harassment. Acorn believes that eligibility for a tenant defense fund should be based on the amount of rent the tenant is paying, similar to the program in Toronto, where the maximum eligibility is market rate plus 25%, so more tenants can access the program. Finally, the program should be run by an existing nonprofit legal organization with expertise in tenant rights. This will remove unnecessary hurdles for vulnerable tenants. As the city memo shows, we have evidence from Hamilton and Toronto that this works. In conclusion, Ottawa Acorn is calling on the councillors here today to take urgent steps to introduce a tenant defense fund in our city. Tenants have had to wait over 1 year for this memo alone. Tenants are losing their housing every day and can't afford to wait any longer. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. There are two individuals so far on the board to ask you questions, so stay put, madame. Conseillère Plante.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much for Acorn for all the wonderful work they do. We are frequently in contact with them, with my office, because of a lot of issues which you are describing. And I just wanted to ask, because we know that a lot of this is provincial laws and provincial mandates, and we're sort of getting downloaded to the municipalities like a lot of things are. I was wondering if you could just describe sort of the process of trying to go through the landlord and tenant board, because I know that's been a really big issue in my ward, is people having to wait too long, and then they're not getting the help they need, and the lawyers move on to other files. So could you sort of describe how painful and how arduous that is, so we can understand why at the municipal level we need to act?
I personally don't deal with these issues for Acorn. I can tell you in my own case, like I live in an apartment, and in April 2022, I received an above guideline rent increase. It was a minor thing. It was only 3% rather than 2.5. I haven't contested it. But we only heard from the landlord and tenant board like a year later. Like, you know, if it had been a really, you know, huge increase that, you know, that people just couldn't afford, we wouldn't know. Like, the rule is that until there's a decision, you don't have to pay the increase. But then, you know, if you're waiting a year and then all of a sudden, you know, you've got thousands of dollars worth of increased rent to pay, that's pretty bad. I personally haven't gone through contesting an above guideline increase because, like I say, this one was relatively minor, and there was one a few years ago that was also minor. But there are some people that that have fairly major increase. For example, in Acora Village, tenants right now are facing a 5.5% rent increase. And Acora Village is home to thousands of tenants, families, students, immigrants, and low-wage workers who can't afford lawyers. Over the past 2 weeks alone, 60+ tenants have participated in Acorn activities to oppose the AGI through collective action, but there's no legal representation for the tenants. So, like, it's, if you have a legal background, or, you know, if you can figure out the system, you can get through it. But the people that are victimized the most are people that are least likely to, you know what to do, and even to know where to turn. So the idea of a tenant defense fund is partly outreach that people, and this idea of a hotline where people could call and say, like, this is what my landlord did. Is he allowed to do that? And if they're not, then, you know, what can I do about it? So it's mainly the people that don't know the system that you know, can be easily victimized, and that's what we think it's important for it to be fought. And like the fact that it took a year to just get this memo. Like I read the memo, and it mentions that this was a motion by Catherine McKinney to have the issue brought before the next council, and Catherine McKinney sort of is no longer part of this council, so I guess there was nobody pushing city staff to do the investigation. And like, we really feel that I understand Councillor Troster's motion, you know, in terms of doing this next year, but we really feel like this needs, you know, it's a problem already. It was a problem a year ago, and waiting another year is not a good thing.
Well, thank you so much for being here, and thank you, Councillor Troster, for championing this. It's very important. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Plante. Councillor Troster.
Hi, Sharon. Thank you for being here, and thank you to Acorn for all the work that you do. Something that I just want to point out before I ask my question is that when tenants don't have access to legal defense or to defense fund, they do come to the councillor's offices. And Stephanie Plante, Councillor Plante, and I both work in wards where we have a high percentage of evictions. My own office is dealing with 4 right now that just came up this week, including a senior. who's living in a unit. I can show you photos with mold and water damage and the worst case of bed bugs we've ever seen, who her landlord is trying to evict her, supposedly for hoarding. We have photos of the unit. There's no hoarding involved. We regularly see long-term tenants that are being pushed out of buildings who don't know their rights, who have no other place to go. So my question for you, Sharon, is the motion, the way it's written, directs staff to look at options, like either creating a new service or scaling up existing ones. I'm just wondering if you have or Acorn has a strong preference about creating something new or directing more funding to Action Logement and housing help.
Well, we felt that because of what we consider to be the urgency of the situation, we felt that, well, okay, Housing Help and Action Logement are working on it now. Give them more money, give them an expanded mandate, and let's get on with it as soon as possible. So that's what we would prefer, and to have it financed in the current budget process.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor DeRoche.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple questions for the delegation. We as a city obviously are the corporate owners of Ottawa Community Housing, and essentially we are the landlords of thousands of tenants. This program that you're envisioning, would you see the program, this defense fund, being eligible for tenants of OCH?
I would. I don't know if Acorn has a position on that, but I certainly would see any tenant that had problems with their landlord being able to access the resources to deal with their landlord.
Okay, thank you for the answer. And I know this is for a study to look at it, and I think there'd be a lot of questions, but I guess one of the questions for me is, if you had a program and there were people who were challenging, let's say, an eviction in OCH, that OCH felt that there was a strong grounds for eviction because there was criminal activity or the tenants were highly disruptive, and there are unfortunately cases like that, and oftentimes we're begged to do something about it so that we have stable, healthy communities. So how would you target the program so that it's for the cases that I think you're outlining today versus the ones where there's legitimate reasons why the person needs to leave that community, again, because of either criminal activity or something that is just so disruptive that that's safe for Ottawa public housing, that we would not want those people as part of that community. So how would you differentiate that programs to target the ones that you're talking about? Thank you.
Well, personally, I would say that, there are some lousy tenants, and, both in the private sector and in OCH, where, I mean, in my building a number of years ago, there was somebody who was dealing drugs out of his apartment and letting all kinds of people into the building, and there were all kinds of break-ins. So it's not just OCH that has this problem. And I think that I don't know if there's an issue of the tenant defense fund being able to sort of look at a tenant who's been given notice to leave, and we look at them and say, well, actually, you should get out of here. But basically, the problem is that people who are not criminals are being victimized by landlords who are misusing the tools that are available to them, and the defense fund is intended to help them. I know that kind of in the legal system, lawyers are supposed to defend anybody who pays them their fee, but I would hope that personally, I would hope that the tenant defense fund people would talk to the nasty criminals and urge them to just leave quietly. But I don't have an absolute answer for you, but I think that there are more of the innocent people being pushed out of housing than there are, as you say, the criminal and, you know, truly disruptive element.
Thank you for your answers. I thank the delegation for their answers, and that's all from me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you very much, Sharon. I'll now ask John Dickey with the Eastern Ontario Landlord Organization to, is John here in person or is he online? Oh, online. Sorry, John, my apologies. John, it is now your 5 minutes. Please proceed.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I appreciate that very much. So I am the chair of the Eastern Ontario Landlord Organization, known as EOLO to us, which represents the owners and managers of more than 40,000 rental units in Ottawa. The people we represent range from the owners of 1 or 2 units to the largest for-profit landlords in Ottawa, 2 of whom have managed or own about 8,000 units. EOLO has participated in housing policy formation, both at the provincial and the city level, since we formed in 1990. EOLO is opposed to the creation of a tenant defense fund, and I will present 3 or 4 policy reasons why we submit the fund as a bad idea. Number 1, the models that are being looked at, Hamilton and Toronto, have the qualification test backwards. In those models, tenants qualify for help by having a low rent, largely or entirely regardless of their income. However, the tenants who have some claim to receive help are those with low incomes. In fact, low rents help people, whereas it is low incomes that hurt people. And in fact, those are the tenants Housing Help, Action Logement, and Legal Aid work for. And in my submission to you, that is the proper approach. Number 2, the models oppose AGIs, but people have a lot of misunderstandings, or a lot of people have misunderstandings about AGIs. The reason AGIs are essential in Ontario's rental housing system is that the annual guideline does not provide a sufficient sum to cover major repairs. Years ago, decades ago, it used to. There was an amount built into the guideline to pay for those, but that was removed more than 15 years ago. And the problem has become especially severe recently because, for example, over the last 4 years, inflation has run at 16%. And landlords' costs in many cases have run ahead of that and are running even more ahead of that now. And the total guideline has been 6%. So there is simply not the revenue stream within buildings to pay for the periodic major repairs that are needed. And that is what AGIs are for. They are not meant for in-unit repairs, contrary to what Acorn has said. They are meant for major repairs, such things as the replacement roof, major concrete repairs to balconies or in a parking garage, or a new backflow prevention device mandated by the city to protect our water supply. Those are the things which are the subject of the 2 AGI applications in Acora Village. And I'm familiar with what is happening in Acora Village. Frankly, my law firm acts on those applications. We know what is going on there, but I will obviously not disclose whatever is solicitor-client privileged. But I can tell you applications, AGI applications, are invariably for those major pieces of work. And tenants are already very well protected because the RTA sets out what can be claimed. There's a limited list of things. They have to be essential work. And the work has to be finished and paid for. And then there is an allowance of part of the cost spread out over time, 10 or 15 or 20 years. And then if the tenant stays in place, then that allowance is removed from the rent after the work has been paid for. So I submit to you, tenants do not need protection against AGIs, but landlords in fact need AGIs to be able to afford to keep buildings in good condition and to improve them to today's standards. Now, I could speak more, and I will run out of time soon, but I can address some of those questions that were put to the previous delegation about AGIs if you wish, or about LTB processes. The other issues here of which are being brought forward are N13s, terminations for demolition, etc. And here the issue is that as a society, we need more housing, and especially more rental housing. And developers come forward, they own some low-rise units in the city, maybe 10 or 20 old, worn-out rental units, and they want to demolish them to build 200 or 300 new ones, often including 20 or 30 units of affordable housing. The city approves through the planning committee, but a tenant defense fund could easily oppose these necessary redevelopments, which other arms of the city have already approved. So in my submission, the best course of action would be to determine the appropriate funding for Housing Help Action Logement in the budget process, and not to waste staff's time, not to set up more bureaucracy, and not to waste taxpayer money for a new and unnecessary program. As I say, I'm happy to take questions on anything I've said or any queries that you have about the processes, because I'm quite familiar with the processes. I've acted on the processes for 40 years, the last 30 for landlords, but for the first 10, I primarily acted for tenants, as it happens. So thank you.
Thank you very much, John. We have a question for you from Concierge Plante.
Thank you, John. It's nice to see you. I was wondering if you could just sort of, as I asked the previous person, can you do a bit of a deep dive into the landlord and tenant board, just to kind of give people an idea of what the landscape is like in Ontario right now? I know my member of provincial parliament has been really active on this file because of all the delays, which do not benefit anyone, especially the vulnerable people who need that kind of recourse. So if I know you have a long history on these sort of files, so if you could talk about it, just kind of give a general, because a lot of people don't, you know, especially if you own your home, you don't understand what the landlord and tenant board does and why it's important that we get it right. Thank you.
Yes, I'll be delighted to do that. And I agree with you 100% that delay does not serve anyone. It is deleterious to low-income tenants, deleterious to other tenants, deleterious to people who've bought houses and cannot move into them because of the delays, deleterious to small landlords who need to operate their buildings. It's frankly, it's deleterious to everyone, and virtually everyone agrees with that. Although the only people who benefit are tenants who need to be evicted because they're performing criminal activity or being seriously disruptive. And then, frankly, it's the other tenants who suffer. The landlord is merely the face of the other tenants trying to rectify the situation in a building. So to the process, to evict a tenant in Ontario, it is necessary for a landlord to give the tenant a notice, and there are various notices for various reasons. But having received the notice, the tenant does not actually have to move out. They can wait and insist that the landlord bring an application to terminate their tenancy and evict them. So those applications are either L1s for non-payment of rent or L2s for practically everything else. So then the landlord makes an application. the notice period has been so many days for rent, 14 days for rent, or it's 4 months for demolition. It's 60 days for personal use. And then the landlord and tenant board process adds another 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 months until the landlord can actually get an order. Now, these delays apply to tenants applying for maintenance problems as well. And again, it would be much better if they were fixed sooner too. But it's certainly the side I come at this on now is the landlord side and these difficulties in working the system. So when I hear about a tenant defense fund, I think to myself, my God, that 10 months may turn into 15 months. And that is deleterious for practically everyone in the system. With respect to AGIs, the system is in a sense worse because for an AGI, as the previous delegate correctly said, a tenant does not have to pay the above guideline increase part. Pending, while the application is pending, they need to pay only the guideline part. So now this year, the guideline is 2.5. For a maximum AGI, you can add 3% for a total of 5.5 this year. So the tenant only needs to pay the 2.5. The difference to 3% would not be the amount that the previous delegate referred to, because say on a rent of on $1,000, 3% would be $30 a month. On $1,700 would be $50 a month. That's between $360 or $600 over a year. So yes, I realize people can have difficulty with those sums, but they're typically not thousands and thousands of dollars. The board also has the power to order the arrears to be paid over 12 months, and often does. So going back to AGIs, in the AGI process, for a number of years, the landlord and tenant board, the LTB we call it, actually put the AGI applications on hold. So landlords were submitting them. In 2020, nothing happened. In 2021, nothing happened. Actually, I've started too late. It started in 2018 and 2019. So we reached a point at which the AGIs were 5 years out of date, which is absolutely ridiculous. It's onerous for everyone. Lots of landlords lost money they couldn't collect because the tenants moved out before they got orders, and other tenants faced some significant arrears. I mean, even at $600 for a year, if the arrears go for 4 years, that's $2,400. But equally, the landlord was out of that money, having already paid for the capital work. So yes, the AGI process was broken. The board recently put on 2 blitzes to process those AGIs, and we are now maybe a year and a half out of date, which is not as bad as it was, but it's still way too late. So there's no question the province should fix the landlord and tenant board, which means either better resources or smoother, more effective systems. We had a smoother system until 18 years ago, but then additional procedural requirements and hurdles were put in place that really slowed down the system. So, Councillor, I see your hand is up, and I hope I haven't gone too far beyond that background that you wanted.
Can I respond? Chair, sorry.
You can comment.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I just wanted to clarify that. I mean, this is my view. I don't think it's, you sort of alluded at the beginning that these are sort of people taking advantage of the system. I view it as people just sort of going through using their rights as tenants and using the legal mechanisms they have available to them. But, we can take that discussion offline, and I appreciate that explanation. Thank you.
Yes, well, thank you. And certainly tenants. Yes.
Mr. Dickey, thank you very much. Unless it was a question, Councilor Blunt. Okay, we have another delegation after this. So thank you very much for being in attendance. Greatly appreciate it. I just, before we call the next delegation, I just want to provide a little bit of clarity as well too. The motion before us is going to be asking to have staff come back with information and their recommendations, and we'll have staff in front of us in a moment to ask that question. So just for clarity, because I know it came up during this last delegation, it's not to vote on this as an established tool in our toolbox today. It is to come back as a multitude of potential options. So I'd like to invite, sorry, je m'excuse, Tung Nugent from the Akora Village Acorn Tenant Unit, who is online. Mr. Nugent, it is your time now.
Morning, councillors. My name is Tung, and I'm a member of the Cora Village Acorn Tenant Union. I got involved with Acorn after an organizer knocked on my door after hearing that our neighborhood received a 5.5% above the guideline rent increase. We all know it at AGI. I joined right away. So I'm speaking to you all today in support of Acorn's campaign for a tenant defense fund, because I have seen its benefits through the success stories in Toronto and Hamilton. And I strongly believe that this fund will be even more relevant and useful in Ottawa, especially for tenants like myself who's facing the AGIs. So first, I have seen the housing crisis all over Canada, and especially in Ottawa. Acorn and other housing organizations agree that in order for housing to be affordable, it should be 30% or less of your gross income. However, it's really hard these days to find a decent place to live that satisfies this rule. What I see on the rental market is that affordable places are usually old and rotten, and decent places are really expensive. Take myself as an example. I rent an apartment without any fancy features like AC or in-suite, washer, dryer, but it already costs about $1,700 per month. And this year I got an AGI of 5.5, so it will soon be 1,800 if the AGI is approved. From my neighbors who have lived here longer, I learned that there are outstanding repairs that the landlord doesn't care to do. If this continues, it will worsen the crisis, because the badly maintained apartment today will be allowed to fall apart, and then the landlords will use it as an excuse to do renovictions and demolitions. This housing crisis happened in a tough time when the cost of living skyrocket. It's really hard to make ends meet these days. Meanwhile, due to the tough economic situation, our incomes cannot be raised enough to match the level of inflation. So we are on an increasingly tighter budget. If my rent increases 5.5%, I will end up having to borrow from my savings or get more credit card debt and have a harder time affording groceries, cost of transit, and all of my other needs. I still remember how I felt the moment I received the N1 notice about the AGI. I knew that it was unfair, as I have seen almost very little renovation in my building in particular. However, I was really helpless because big corporations usually have lawyer teams and money at their disposal. So I felt almost impossible to take legal action. So challenging AGI means going through pages of evidence submitted by the landlord and disputing them line by line. So neither myself or my neighbors have the legal background, training, or time to do this. Most of us are working, supporting our families, or in a school full-time. I know that many other tenants all over Canada have to cope with the same unfair treatments, or even worse, renovation and demolition. A tenant defense fund will provide useful resources for tenants coping with those predatory actions from their landlords. One tenant alone is always too helpless to face a whole corporation. So a group of tenants with good legal supports is an ideal way to balance the power and to shy the landlords away from taking retaliation against us for simply exercising our rights. To sum up, housing is a human right, not a commodity. A tenant defense fund will help guarantee this basic right. So thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nugent. We have a question from Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nugent. I believe I saw you on Saturday, if I'm not mistaken, at Akora Village, and I share the concern when tenants get a very high increase. We're all told to tighten our belts as we deal with high grocery costs, high rents, et cetera. But somehow landlords are not calculating in major expenses, because this is the excuse that's being used for these increases, is that in terms of a business model, this should be calculated in with their regular expenses, just like anyone else who has to run a household or pay bills. But we have heard from Akora Village, and this is the reasoning, is they're doing major repairs. I'm aware of that, but it's pretty devastating on tenants like yourself. I just wanted to say thanks for coming out and speaking out. I understand the issue, and I think that there should be a mechanism for tenants to have an opportunity to speak back. So, and a lot of those resources that have been used in the past, such as legal services, have been cut back by the province. And I think that's where we have to concentrate an effort to have for tenants to defend themselves and have a fund, and that it should be through those mechanisms that were in place before, and now they're lost because of cutbacks. So I appreciate you speaking out, because I think it's difficult because people worry about retaliation. I think there was a lot of fear that people felt that if they spoke out, they would be evicted. And that is just so ridiculous that you can't speak out and ask questions. So thank you for speaking out and demanding to know why this is happening, and that we need to have a better mechanism for tenants. Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for being here.
Chair, if I can, I'd like to just add some information from a line of questioning that came out earlier about OCH, because above guideline increases are not a part of OCH. We have rent geared to income, i.e. that people do not pay based, the increases are based on their income. So we have 12,271 tenants who are in rent geared to income. So it should be noted that's a different, this, because it is nonprofit, and as we know, Ottawa is the only shareholder of Ottawa Community Housing, that this is not the same as what is being discussed here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kavanagh. As chair, you bring a lot of insight into the role of OCH to this committee. So thank you for adding that information.
I think that clarification was
That's
needed.
appreciated. Thank you. We are going to move on to questions to staff. Staff, first of all, do we have any questions for staff? Ne pas de questions? Okay. I'd just like to make a comment. Okay. Well, I think we do have a question from Councillor Kavanagh.
Sorry. Thank you. I just wanted, I appreciate the report and that we're looking into this issue. I just wanted to get a sense of what staff saw as the best mechanism for a tenant defense fund, since there are groups out there that are helping tenants currently, but are not funded for this kind of work for very specific cases. So I'd just like to get their feedback on that.
Thank you, through the chair. The work that will be done as part of the refresh of the 10-year housing and homelessness plan will include a look at housing prevention approaches, including what happens right now. And what we do when we do revise the 10-year plan, we also do an all of province best case scenario assessment and best practices assessment. And we do an extensive consultation with people who are experiencing homelessness and tenants, as well as service providers, partners, and other interested stakeholders. And so for us, we are not committing to a tenant defense fund as staff at this stage. We're committing to reviewing housing loss prevention strategies, including strategies such as tenant defense funds, and what it would take to implement one that goes beyond the services that are currently being implemented today. What it would take to implement one here in Ottawa. And then we would come back, I would suggest at the 2025 budget time with, if the direction is to move forward with the tenant defense fund, there would be financial and budget implications, staff to administer and additional monies to be funded. And we'd have to review, are we looking at the existing services that are being funded, adding to the existing services, and or a different approach. So we are, as we understand it in the motion, committing to reviewing tenant defense funds strategies as part of our 10-year housing and homelessness review.
Thank you very much. I just want to know if there's been any lessons learned, because we've seen major renovictions happen in our city, and these are private landlords, and that were pretty catastrophic in terms of what's taking away a lot of affordable housing. And if we're taking those into consideration, situations like the Heron Gates and others.
Thank you for the question. We believe in funding or the agencies in the community that have the expertise to support people with legal processes that they might be facing. And that's why we fund housing help and Action Logement for these purposes. As you saw in the memo that we provided, they are oversubscribed. So we absolutely concur that there is a need for more service of this nature. But yes, we continue to fund those services exactly for the reasons that you described, Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanaugh. Were there any other questions for staff at this time? Councillor Troster.
Thank you. I don't want to take up too much time, but thank you so much for the discussion today, everybody. I can understand the frustration that because of a failure of the Landlord-Tenant Tribunal and the failure of Ontario law protecting tenants, it's another downloading of services onto municipalities. But this is housing loss prevention. This is homelessness prevention. And right now, as I mentioned earlier, this caseload is coming to counselors' offices when there are no services available for people. So my office caseworker, I've hired a full-time social worker, which I am not paying him market salary based on my own, what our office budgets are. I mean, he physically went into the senior's apartment and lifted her mattress and saw the worst case of bed bugs he's ever seen in his life. He's now helping to defend her against what we believe is an unjust eviction. I think we're being forced to take on cases that are technically not, our responsibilities, but I can't just let a senior be put on the street. There's currently a fellow who's sleeping in Minto Park who was evicted from a rooming house just a few blocks from City Hall, where the landlord has evicted tenants one by one and jacked the rents to $1,500 a month. And it's resulted in at least 2 cases of homelessness and situations where people have absolutely no resources to defend themselves. So all we're asking for is to ensure that these folks have someone to talk to, because otherwise they're going to come to us and we can't always help. And if we can prevent a senior from ending up in the shelter system, that's going to save us money in the long term. So anyway, I'm not seeing a lot of discord on this issue, but I just want to thank you for supporting my motion to bring it forward today. I really do think it's important, and this is just a first step. We're just asking staff to come back to us with options as part of our homelessness prevention plan. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Troster. I'm not seeing any other hands up, and no one around the table has any further questions. Is this item carried? Oh, sorry, forgive me.
Sorry, Chair, I was trying to get
Hand
your
up from
attention.
Clara.
Can I just jump in for a clarification on the memo? I just have a clarification on the 1, 2, 3rd, where 3rd, be it further resolved, that it's referring to bringing back an additional memo at the end of Q4. I would humbly suggest that we do that as part of our annual update on our 10-year plan, if that's acceptable.
Yeah, that's acceptable. It's a friendly amendment. Sure.
Okay. So I feel like we already did this, but is this item carried? Carried.
Dissent for me. Thank you.
And for
Dissent chair from Councillor Brown.
Councillor Brown as well. Was there any other dissents? No, seeing none. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. We'll now move on to item motions of which of notice of has been previously given. Item 9.1. Councillor Plant, would you be able to read your motion again? I understand there's a slight wording change at the end.
Course, sorry. Be it resolved that the City of Ottawa address homelessness by funding the development of new emergency shelter spaces in every area of the City of Ottawa. Be it further resolved that the City of Ottawa take matters of equity and diversity into consideration before investing in new funding and making decisions with respect to the relocation of emergency accommodations and shelters. Merci.
Sorry, just as a matter of clarification, our committee coordinators indicated that you may have read the previous version. Is that online on the screen? Okay. Okay, and we can all see it. Okay, good. Does anyone have any questions about this motion?
Maybe. Can we put it back on the screen?
Well, Councillor Carr, while you're reading that over, I do have a question for staff. I wanted to understand from staff's perspective, what's your interpretation of this motion? And is this work that you are already undertaking? And what kind of resourcing would you be required to look at this? I'm just trying to understand what your understanding is of the implications of this motion.
Thank you for the question, Chair. So as part of our ongoing work, we absolutely work with nonprofit organizations and others to address housing and homelessness issues and crises, including the need for shelter. Community partners also make decisions about where they locate their services based on their operational mandate and priorities. And while we're often a partner, a funding partner, we do not have authority over nonprofit organizations and or their full budgets. So our ability to make decisions about where shelters are placed is curtailed and limited. That said, we always provide and use an equity lens, an equity referring to not only people across equity deserving groups who require shelter, but we also look at the whole of the city, population, demographics, and other considerations before we make any policy and or programming decisions and before we engage in funding decisions with nonprofit partners. So that's a long answer to say this is work that is already being undertaken by our department.
Okay, thank you for that. But I just want to delve into that slightly more. The first, therefore, be resolved. I just want to be clear on that. This is not directing the city or staff to fund and build shelters, emergency shelter spaces in every ward if it doesn't make sense. There will be consideration given this is work you're already doing as part of the plan, that you'll take into consider potential locations based on the city's overall intentions to house our most vulnerable. Is that, I just want to make sure that this is not so completely prescriptive that every single ward sees something if it doesn't make sense, or that it binds our hands when we're looking at opportunities across our city to actually address the issues of homelessness in our community.
Staff, Chair, staff are not interpreting that therefore be it resolved as a direction to open new shelters in every ward of the city. How we are reading that is to ensure that we take an all of city approach when we're planning any service decision or expansion in relation to community requirement, need, or crisis.
Okay, thank you for the clarity. I see a question from Councillor Carr.
Hi, thanks very much. I just wanted to clarify the second clause, be it further resolved that the City of Ottawa take matters of equity and diversity into consideration when we have people that need housing. And when I look in my ward at the use of my recreational facilities over the past several years, a good proportion of the people that are currently within the Dempsey Community Center, for example, are people who come from a diverse background. We currently have over 50% of people in that facility that have just arrived or are new Canadians. So this themselves and being able to provide people needing housing we are considering equity and diversity in that already. So is this speaking to the people that we are looking to house? I just want to clarify what we're looking at when we're talking about equity and diversity. Is it providing housing to people that need shelter? Can we just confirm that, the wording?
Is this a question? Sorry, for clarification, Chair, is this a question to staff or to the mover of the motion?
The interpretation of it to staff, I guess, is the point, because to me, it's a bit nebulous.
Thank you for that clarification, Chair. As we interpret that clause, it is to use an equity lens and approach. It's more of a broader equity lens and approach. So as I said, it could include ensuring that anyone in need and their specific needs, if they are an equity deserving group, are taken into consideration, as well as a citywide approach with taking into account where the needs are across the city, demographics. And then we would also be employing, of course, the criteria approved by council that we use to designate any other facility or space, emergency shelter space. So we are staff are interpreting that very broadly.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Plante.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say you were right. I read it off the wrong screen. I had one screen open and it wasn't the Zoom screen. I just wanted that clarification. Thank you for noticing.
Okay, well, I can't take the credit. Our amazing committee coordinator noticed that. No, absolutely no problem. Was there any other questions or comments? No? Seeing none, is this item carried? Carried? Okay. Okay, moving on to item 9.2. This is Councillor Carr on behalf of Councillor Kitts, who I see has joined us today regarding Community Garden Action Plan Review and Update. Eric, if we could have the motion on screen, and if Councillor Carr or Kitts wishes to read the therefore be resolved.
If I could pass that on to Councillor Kitts.
Sure, I'm still booting up over here. So once it's on the screen, I can read it, but wanted to say thank you to Councillor Carr for moving it on my behalf. And we've had a lot of conversations on this, and I based on some feedback I've had in advance of this meeting, I think others feel strongly about this as well. So be it resolved that the Community Service Committee recommend that Council direct the Recreation Cultural Facility Services Department and the Community and Social Services Department, in partnership with the Planning, Real Estate and Economic Development Department and Public Works Department, to conduct a comprehensive review of the Community Garden Action Plan and develop an update to the plan with formal recommendations on processes, scope, lead, and necessary resources for considering and facilitating community gardens and similar green community-led initiatives on city-owned land. And be it further resolved that the Community Services Committee recommend that Council direct city staff to present the revised Community Garden Action Plan and recommendations for implementation to Community Services Committee and Council by Q2 2024.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kitts. We have one delegation on this item, and I believe she is online. Kate Vinot from Just Food. Kate, are you with us? Oh, I can see it.
I'm here.
Perfect. Please proceed.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Kate Vino, and I'm the coordinator of the Community Gardening Network at Just Food. I'd just like to voice our support for this motion with a few things we're asking councillors to take note of and support with staff action on the upcoming report. First, a quick note on the motion. Since 1997, when the Community Gardening Network was established, the term community gardens did not exclusively refer only to publicly accessible food gardens, but has always included food growing in the right of way and many green community-led initiatives, including pollinator gardens, community orchards, children's gardens, all of which the CGN has facilitated, and many incorporating greening and social gathering infrastructure elements. Second, in recent years, due to many factors, including financial pressures and global instability, including but not limited to the pandemic, we have endured food shortages, supply chain challenges, and now significantly rising food prices. Residents have increasingly become interested in accessing community gardens to address their growing food security concerns. Despite the overwhelming support from residents, councillors, and most city staff for increased access to community gardening and broader greening initiatives, there has been a disproportionate block on creating collaborative processes from a very few city staff, preventing new gardens on city land for years and preventing existing gardens from flourishing, which is not supporting council's initial direction. We are asking for you to confirm to staff the need to facilitate collaborative solutions across departments and across resident and city needs. We are confident these win-win solutions exist. There are currently thousands of people in Algonquin, Ottawa wanting to grow food without the land access to do so. And with the many viable city stewarded land options, including parkland, natural resource land, residential right-of-way, and surplus lands, we need to find solutions to support community gardening in these spaces while addressing the increased pressures for recreational activities. Again, we're confident these win-win solutions exist. As we work so closely with community members to support their projects, we can speak to their creative and innovative nature to pivot, accommodate, and innovate for recreational activities and gardening activities to share the land being requested. This collaborative nature has not recently been reciprocated, which makes access either difficult or prohibitive for the community, councillors, and other city staff to navigate. On more than one occasion, volunteer community garden coordinators have altered their plans to meet the requests from city staff, to then still have their project denied for reasons that neither the community nor the councillors find acceptable. This understandably leads to frustration and disengagement from these community volunteers, which is in direct opposition to the collective impact we need to build community and increase food security, while also addressing the myriad of other city priorities that community gardening achieves. We're looking to you, councillors, to ensure that this report not only addresses land access opportunities and community gardening and greening standards, but also addresses the unresolved operational issues and processes that have prevented us from successfully adding more than one garden on city land in the past 5 years, leading to a serious backlog in requests. We look forward to working with city staff on this report to find mutually beneficial solutions that will bring Algonquin, Ottawa back to the forefront of building food resilient neighborhoods through the range of inspirational community gardening initiatives that your residents want to engage in. Thank you, councillors, for your time, and we really can't wait to see more community garden projects in each of your wards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. I see a question first from Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Kate, for coming out today, and thank you for all your work with Just Foods. I'm constantly getting asked by community members about establishing new community gardens, and I have to admit the process is daunting to get it going, and there definitely needs to be some streamlining. I just want to ask for your suggestions. One of the questions I specifically have is the delays related to liability and insurance concerns by the city? Maybe that's a question I need to ask staff, but I'm just from your side.
Sorry, so the question is the insurance liability. I suppose one note is that as part of being part of the community gardening network, that community gardens are tied into an insurance program, a free insurance program that is provided through the city. So that there is that third party general liability coverage for community gardening activities. I'm not sure if that wraps
Okay,
up.
so it's like okay, so it's a blanket one. That's good to know. What are the reasons for the delays? What are typically the reasons for delays?
It's really the connection between departments. That's the roadblock here, that it's the communication happening between departments. I would also really like the chance to consult with our broader team to provide an accurate answer for you for this. And I'd be happy to get back to the chair tomorrow to be able to get that full picture for you and pull on, because this goes back for many years, that pulls on more experiences that we would be able to provide if I consult with the team to put that together for you.
I appreciate that. I mean, I've got anecdotal evidence in my own ward, but I'd just like to know overall what the biggest issues are to get more community gardens going. So thank you, Kate.
Yeah, I will provide that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Carr.
Thank you very much. And I move this motion on behalf of Councillor Kit, simply for the reason that we have had many discussions about the importance of these community gardens in the city. I did want to make one slight correction. Well, we haven't put any community gardens through the community gardening program on city lands since 2019. We do have city gardens on the Kilbourne Allotment Gardens in my ward, which is a very unique piece of land. It is originally scheduled to be a highway. However, we will be keeping the gardens as long as I'm the councillor. No, but anyway, there are 420 garden plots there with a waiting list. Hugely successful. 80% of the users of those gardens identify as either low income seniors or new Canadians. They have gardens there for the shepherds of Good Hope that supply a lot of their foods. So I just wanted to make that correction, because I think this may be also an opportunity to look at where appropriate city parcels of land can be in terms of making successful gardens, because certainly that transportation corridor itself, which I don't call it a transportation corridor, certainly has the opportunity, if we could, to expand, for example, if we would install some water sources and whatever else. I do think that there's lots of opportunity in the city to look at city-owned lands as well that potentially aren't parks, but fully supportive, and thanks to my colleague, Councillor Kitts.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. I'm not seeing any other questions, but I'll offer to Councillor Kitts to wrap up.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, thanks everyone for your comments. I think, it's time for this action plan to have a refresh. It hasn't been updated since it was first created in 2009. And as Just Food noted, there is a lot of interest in the community in this type of thing. And many of those requests are for city-owned parkland. All 15 requests on city land since 2019 were on parkland. And since then, no garden has actually been approved. So I felt compelled to bring this forward after my own experience, working over a year's time with a community group, a lot of volunteer hours invested, a lot of back and forth between myself and my staff, only to get a no towards the end of the process. So I think that, lends itself to a broken process. And I think there's a way to do this better. So thank you for considering, and thanks to the community groups that also helped bring this forward.
I want to thank Councillor Kitts and Councillor Carr for bringing this forward. I have to say, I think we have all had those experiences with our community groups where it's been an onerous process to maybe get a no. I'd also say, I think staff are probably keen to review this too. It's unlikely they want to go through all the rigors of the red tape that's established over the years and kind of built up. So I think this is absolutely timely. I fully support this, and thank you for bringing this forward. Is this item carried? Carried. Wonderful. Thank you very much. We're now moving to item 9.3, and that is Councillor Plante for Lowertown Community Resource Center relocation. Councillor Plante, do you want to just read the therefore it be resolved in the motion? And I know we do have a delegation, and we will have a delegation. So if Karina Potvin wants to come grab a seat just as we're reading this motion, and then we'll come to you.
Microphone.
Sorry. Be it resolved that the City of Ottawa consider programming that meets the needs of the surrounding Lower Town East community when deciding on how to manage operations at 40 Cobourg. And be it further resolved that city staff be directed to consider the lease agreement with the Lower Town Community Resource Center covering the transfer of its food bank at 40 Cobourg so that it can better meet the food and security needs of the community. And be it further resolved that the City Council agrees to waive this section of the city's leasing policy that requires public notice of surplus real property available for lease should the parties agree to a lease agreement. And be it further resolved that city be henceforth responsible for the management and operation of the city-owned building. Merci.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Karina Potvin from the Conseil d'administration du Patro d'Ottawa. You have 5 minutes to speak. Please proceed.
Bonjour à tous. Merci de m'accueillir ce matin. Je suis la présidente du CA du Patro d'Ottawa et aussi résidente du quartier Rideau-Vanier depuis quasiment 50 ans. Alors, je m'adresse à vous aujourd'hui au nom du Patro. C'est une institution qui est fort et pour la communauté de la Basse-Ville depuis 1958. C'est une institution essentielle pour la communauté francophone, mais pas uniquement pour la communauté francophone. Le Patro d'Ottawa, c'est un organisme communautaire qui dessert des milliers de bénéficiaires grâce à des programmes et services sociaux et récréatifs, et ce, depuis plusieurs années. Le Patro, c'est un partenaire de choix avec une dizaine d'autres institutions et d'organismes de la communauté, et depuis plusieurs années, et par le passé, on est venu à la défense de nos citoyens qui n'ont pas de voix dans la communauté. Le Patro d'Ottawa, c'est 40 ans de relations mutuelles bénéfiques avec la Ville, lui permettant de contribuer au bien-être des citoyens de la Basse-Ville, autant francophones, francophiles et allophones. Un exemple, parmi tant d'autres, c'est le partenariat qui a été mis en place pendant la pandémie, qui a permis à fournir un toit à ceux qui étaient dans le besoin. Mais le Patro, c'est aussi un locataire auquel la Ville a fourni abruptement un avis de résiliation d'entente qui, à toute fin pratique, équivaut à un avis d'éviction. Dans ces circonstances, j'ai 4 questions pour le comité. Pourquoi le Patro a-t-il été tenu à l'écart de la démarche présentée aujourd'hui par la motion? Jamais lors de nos échanges avec des représentants élus et fonctionnaires de la Ville, cette éventualité n'a été abordée. Pourtant, nous avons toujours démontré que nous étions toujours ouverts à appuyer les organismes qui font face à défis, et ce encore juste dans les derniers jours. Quel est votre plan de match global pour servir la communauté de la Basse-Ville à partir du 40 Cobourg? Le Patro d'Ottawa fait-il partie de ce plan de match? Si la réponse est oui, est-ce que l'impact sur le Patro de l'initiative présentée aujourd'hui a été pris en compte? Alors, ce n'est pas 5 minutes, je sais que j'ai 5 minutes, et je me résume à cela. Alors, sur ce, merci de m'avoir écouté.
Merci, Madame. Je vois une question de la conseillère Plante, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Karina, d'être là aujourd'hui. Je sais que vous avez un horaire très chargé. Premièrement, je ne suis pas d'accord qu'on n'a pas été en communication. Je trouve qu'il y avait beaucoup de communication entre la Ville, mon bureau et vous et l'ancien conseiller aussi. Mais est-ce que le Patro appuierait, excuse-moi mon futur simple là, qu'on désigne le Patro comme un emplacement où il y a la majorité, sinon la plupart des services offerts à cet emplacement-là en français?
Le Patro, par sa mission, dessert la communauté francophone et ça a été toujours sa mission et la vision. Par contre, puis là, je ne vais pas rentrer dans l'historique de la Basse-Ville. De fait, la Basse-Ville a été initialement peuplée par une communauté francophone. Puis on ne rentrera pas dans l'historique de pourquoi ce n'est plus le cas en ce moment, ou une communauté peut-être un petit peu moins présente francophone que c'est le cas. Toutefois, Le patro s'est réinventé à maintes reprises depuis 1958 et s'est ajusté et a démontré des ajustements à maintes reprises, justement pour répondre aux besoins évoluants de la communauté. C'est certain que c'est un organisme à but non lucratif avec des limites dans ses capacités, qui offre beaucoup avec le bénévolat. Donc, on sait tous que dans ces circonstances-là, des fois, l'évolution n'est pas aussi vite. Mais à l'opinion du CA du Patro, c'est on a toujours œuvré dans les meilleures intentions, avec les capacités qu'on avait et avec une ouverture d'esprit et œuvré avec les gens qui même sont dans le même édifice que le Patro et tendu la main à maintes reprises et continue. Je vais aussi insister que si on s'accroche sur les fils, sur des historiques passés, on n'avancera pas. Il faut regarder vers l'avant et je crois que depuis la dernière année, le Patro a fait beaucoup pour se réinventer post-pandémie, pour s'ajuster aux demandes de la Ville. On a entendu ce que la Ville nous a dit et encore, c'est un organisme à but non lucratif avec des limites financières et c'est que par le partenariat que le tout peut fonctionner.
Oui, peut-être que vous ne m'avez pas répondu à la question. Est-ce que le Patro appuierait une motion que l'édifice elle-même serve de la majorité de la communauté francophone, que les services offerts dans le bâtiment soient majoritairement francophones? Est-ce que c'est quelque chose que tu penses le CA?
Appuyer une motion que la majorité des services sont en français, oui, pareil comme appuyer une motion que les services, à la base, le Patro veut que la communauté soit desservie et que les besoins sont répondus. Uniquement en français, non. Prioriser le français, oui, mais pas au détriment des besoins de la communauté.
Je suis entièrement d'accord. Merci.
Merci, Madame. Je ne vois pas d'autres questions. Je vous remercie pour votre présentation aujourd'hui. Est-ce qu'une autre question pour l'employé de la ville? Does anybody have any questions for city staff regarding this motion?
Sorry.
Oh, yes.
Yep. I was wondering if, Mr. Chenier, you could sort of expand upon the question I asked, which is it possible to designate a certain city facility to have Francophone services dedicated to that? Is that possible? That's something we can do?
Chair, it absolutely is. In fact, by a direction of City Council of the former City of Ottawa many years ago, that was in fact the case. And so with this motion, even though one of our goals is to look at serving the whole Lower Town community. And yes, that still includes a strong Francophone component, but also goes beyond that because there has been a long-standing request, and I mean several years going back, for a greater variety of service that does include English programming. And so this motion essentially sets the table to be able to move in that direction in the years to come.
So sorry, just so I'm clear, if not necessarily right now, but in the future community services meeting, if we have a direction to, when we look at the new programming for the Patron in the new year, to have a large percentage of it to be Francophone, that would be something that staff would support.
Absolutely. That would be the intent in our programming approach and in the partnerships that we continue to foster with whatever organizations come to the table.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And just for clarity in respect to that, that could be something that could be a discussion with the counselor's office and recreation cultural facilities. It doesn't necessarily require a motion. Is that correct, Dan? Or would it?
That particular aspect does not require, I mean, staff would certainly take the direction from committee, but it is our intent and always has been. That building has been seen as a flagship for Francophone programming, not just locally, but across the city, I think. And there is no intent to dilute that. So yes, staff are very comfortable with that position.
Wonderful. It's such an important issue for that particular neighborhood, that ward, that community, and this counselor. So I would like to see that be worked on behind the scenes rather than have to bring it to committee if not required. Thank you. Was there any other comments or questions in respect to this motion? Nope, seeing none, is that item carried? Carried. I'm not aware of any other notices of motion. We do have two inquiries, two at this time, unless there's a third that surprises me. So, Councillor Carr, we'll start with you. Okay. You were first on the list, but I can hold off if you want. We can, as long as it goes on the screen, I should be good. Okay. First come, first served. No.
Excellent. Okay, this is particularly timely in light of Councillor Kavanaugh's question earlier today. So food insecurity is reaching crisis levels in the city with the cost of living crisis. Since 2019, food banks across Ottawa have seen 19% more visits from two-parent families and 37% more visits from households who receive most of their income from employment. This shows the shifting demographics of who is accessing emergency food assistance citywide. Food security agencies are primarily nonprofits responding to the needs citywide. The City of Ottawa supports these nonprofits through the Sustainability Fund budget. The yearly increase to this fund is typically 2%. The not-for-profit sector cannot continue to operate at this capacity and respond to the growing need without additional support. Therefore, could staff please explore and advise committee ahead of budget 2024 on the possibility of increasing Sustainability Fund budget for agencies primarily operating in food programming and services by 10%.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carr. So that's an inquiry for staff. Did you wish to add something else, or? You paused for a moment.
Yes, I did, because I wasn't quite sure how to present an inquiry, but yes, thank you. And just to mention that I've met with Rachel Wilson of the Ottawa Food Bank, who has been working with some of these organizations that are involved in food security, as well as being home to the Kilbourne Allotment Gardens, which grow lots of food. I am also now home to the new home of the Ottawa Food Bank. As soon as I was elected, they moved out of Councillor Tierney's ward and into mine. So I've been working with Rachel Wilson on this, and I think that this is something that we need to be very concerned about, is the state of food insecurity in the city, and the fact that it is not something that is funded properly at any level of government. There's no level that is responsible for this, and something we should be concerned about. So I appreciate you looking into the inquiry that I presented. Thanks, staff.
Thank you very much. And I just for a point of clarification from staff, this is a tight time turnaround for you to present this information. I believe Councillor Carr is asking for this to be provided prior to budget discussions, if I read that correctly. Are there any concerns, or will you be able to produce something that will answer the call for this inquiry?
Thank you for that, Chair. We will be working with our colleagues from financial services to do the analysis. So we should be able to do that in time. We would ask for clarification in the inquiry. It speaks to agencies primarily operating in food programming and services. So are we specifically looking at the organizations we fund who only provide food security, such as food banks? Or are we looking at the broader list of agencies that contribute to food security through their programming, such as, for instance, community houses?
So the community houses that have food banks within are included in this.
Thank you for that clarification. So it's a broader group.
Correct. It encompasses probably about 20 organizations within the city. But there are some organizations, for example, I believe Just Food, that would also be included in there as well.
So, Clara, does that change your response in terms of being able to provide a fulsome piece of information, detailed information, by the time budget consultations begin? Because I think our budget meeting for this committee is November 28th.
Thank you, Chair. So we will provide a response that will include perhaps a couple of different options, depending on how we interpret the nature of the mandate of the organizations that we fund.
Thank you very much. Okay, perfect. And it's, if it's possible, you can connect with me after for any clarifications, if that's okay. Thanks. Wonderful. Okay, thank you very much. Our next inquiry is from Councillor Troster.
Thank you so much, Chair. Many frontline staff have informed our office that the homeless population they work with is severely undercounted and underserved. This is particularly the case for Ward 14, where we have a growing number of homeless constituents sleeping rough, but not accessing traditional shelter systems. We have a large proportion of people who are dangerously couch surfing or squatting, and we know of some individuals who live in unsafe housing with as many as 15 people at a time in a unit. Many individuals will refuse to complete a service prioritization decision assistance tool, it's called the SPDAT, as they find the process invasive, repetitive, and re-traumatizing. And many of these individuals would also be ideal candidates for the new supportive housing units the city has committed to building, should they be officially assessed. In the interest of understanding the level of need in our community and the process of data collection, could staff please clarify, 1, how does the SPDAT criteria determine if someone is homeless? A, does this criteria capture individuals who are unable or unwilling to access the shelter system? B, how is someone categorized if they are precariously housed, couch surfing, or squatting? 2, how long has the city been using SPDAT as an assessment tool? Who is authorized to SPDAT unsheltered individuals? A, how are unsheltered, precariously housed, couch surfing, and or squatting individuals contacted? B, what is the capacity of the organizations authorized to do SPDATs? Can this capacity be increased? C, have alternative assessment tools such as BC's vulnerability assessment tool been considered for local use? 3, in June, we were told that there were 115 unsheltered individuals in the city of Ottawa, acknowledging this group was likely undercounted. Staff estimated 280 individuals were unsheltered as of mid-October. How was this estimation reached? What, if any, steps have been taken to better capture this population? What could be taken, what steps could be taken moving forward? And 4, due to the transient nature of living homeless, many people do not stay in a single location. We have been told by frontline staff and homeless constituents that an individual must remain in the same location for up to a week to be captured as homeless. Does being transient restrict the services unsheltered residents can access? And if yes, in what ways? So just to say, we want to make sure that we are counting and documenting the folks who are in most need of housing and in most need of supportive housing. And my concern is that with the scale up we're doing of supportive housing, that we won't be reaching the people who probably need it the most. So thank you so much for staff for looking into this.
Thank you very much, Councillor Troster. There are no other inquiries at this time that I'm aware of. No, we're good. We have no other business to discuss. And now, and I move a motion for adjournment. Our next meeting is November 28th, as I mentioned, is going to be budget meeting. So please anticipate a longer meeting. Book it off in your calendars. Is this motion carried on adjournment? Thank you. Great. Have a good rest of your day, everyone.